Welcome to the Fill Your Cups podcast. I'm your host, Morgan, and my co-host, Bailey. She is on podcast maternity leave, but she's going to come back and chat with us a bit next week. So more to come on that. Today's episode is going to be about starting over. I want to talk a little bit about this because I feel like it's something that we all face. At some point, we are doing something that we just honestly just need to just 180, completely start over. Is it 180 or would it be 360? I don't know, whatever. You completely start over and that's okay. But sometimes it's hard to tell or notice the signs of when that time is, when that starting over point should be. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in this episode today. I would love to hear if you resonate with this, if you feel like you're at a kind of a pivot point in your life right now, whether that's in your career or relationship or your health journey, whatever that is. I'd love to hear if you feel like you're kind of at a point where you need to either realign or start over. I'd love to hear about that. But before we get into the episode, I do want to talk about what's filling my cup. So today I have Scout Coffee. It's my go-to. I love them. Shout out to Scout. That was an unofficial shout out because I have a different shout out. But I got a dirty almond milk chai latte, and today I got some sugar-free caramel in there just for kicks and giggles, you know? So I love my Scout. That is what's filling my cup. Hopefully you guys have something yummy filling your cups while you're listening to this. If you're in the car, maybe you're on your way to work, you got some coffee. Maybe you're getting ready in the morning, you got some pre-workout or something going. I've been on an energized kick lately. If you don't know what that is, hit me up because it's the best. Whatever it is, I hope that you have something yummy and tasty to enjoy this episode. I do want to do our shout out. So today is my sister Bailey's birthday. We both got lucky this year because both of our birthdays happen to be on Mondays this year. And that's when we release new episodes of the podcast. So her birthday is November 10th. Happy birthday, Bailey Rose. If you didn't know that her daughter, Mila Rose, her middle name is also Bailey's middle name. So happy birthday, Bailey Rose. I love ya and love the journey that we've done up to this point on Fill Your Cups podcast together. Shout out to you and happy birthday. Please send Bailey happy birthday wishes if you haven't already. Now, getting into the episode. So normally we talk about like where we thought of these episodes, and just to be totally frank with you, okay, story time. I'm going to tell you a little story about where I kind of like thought of this episode and just be real and honest with you. So I've mentioned before that my husband Jared and I go on walks every morning with our dog. He can't live without them. Our dog, not my husband, but our dog he has to have his morning walk and has to have his afternoon walk. So it's a great time for us to separate the workday from our real life anyway. So we really like it and we just kind of catch up, whatever. But in the mornings, obviously, neither of us have had our coffee. Typically, I have had my pre-workout, so I have some caffeine. But you know how sometimes you're a little cranky in the mornings, and especially if it's like a gloomy weather day or chilly or something like that, you're not really chatty. So sometimes on our walks, we don't really talk very much, at least on the morning ones. But recently we were having a walk and I don't even remember what we were talking about, but it felt like one of those moments when, you know, with your partner or spouse or whomever it is that you're talking with, and you just feel like you're kind of doing this. If you're on YouTube, you can see I'm like putting my arms out in front of me and trying to cross them. Like you're just not aligning, right? Like you're just going past each other. I was noticing this because we were saying a lot of things like, well, no, that's not really what I meant. Or, well, what I was saying was blah, blah, blah. And just kind of justifying what we were saying. And I truly don't even remember what it was. But at some point I was like, dude, we are not connecting. We're not in sync right now. And I can tell it's irritating both of us. So I just said, hey, babe, I love you. Can we just start this over? Can we just have a do-over? Because I feel like right now we're not believing the best in each other. We're kind of assuming the worst intent in whatever the other one is saying. and things are, we're just not connecting correctly and we're not understanding each other. And I just think we need to start over. And it was in that, and it was better. Honestly, I think we just talked less on the rest of the walk, in all honesty. But I think that it was just a moment for us to recalibrate. Okay, we're on each other's team. We don't need to be we don't need to be justifying ourselves or explaining our thoughts or anything like that. We can just listen to one another and just know that that person means the best, So I don't know if that's very relatable to you. If you ever have moments like that where you're just not clicking with your partner or in a close relationship and you just need to start over, but that might be something that could help. It kind of reminds me of, I think it's in the show, it's not Big Bang Theory. It's the How I Met Your Mother. How I Met Your Mother. It's Lily and Marshall. They do like the pause thing, which I've always thought would be really cool, but it seems really hard to implement. But they will like put a pause in their conversation if they're having a really rough conversation or an argument or something, and they just go pause. And then at that moment, they have to leave it and they come back to it later, maybe, or they don't if it's not that important. So it kind of reminded me of that. But really all I was saying was like, let's just do a cartwheel, whatever, flip this over and start over. So we did that. And I was thinking about it later on in the day. And I was like, this would actually be a really good podcast episode because that's a really trivial example. That was just like in a conversation. But there are so many times when we are just trucking along, we are doubling down, we are full speed ahead in what we're doing, and we're honestly unhappy. And what we really need, instead of just grinding it out and moving forward and accelerating and just doing more and more of what we're already doing that's making us unhappy, is just starting over. And I think that starting over, there's a lot of ego attached to this. We don't like to think of ourselves as quitters. We don't like to start over because of, sunk cost fallacy, where we think, oh, well, I've already put all this time and energy into this. If I start over, then all that time and energy was wasted. But if you don't know sunk cost fallacy, the whole idea is that, well, that time and energy has already been spent. So you're not wasting anything if you start over. But the conversation that we had and that helpful piece of starting over really made me think that this could apply to larger areas of life. And so I wanted to come on here and talk with you about it. So my hope is that you could resonate with this, and that maybe if there is something in your life right now that you have been questioning or full steam ahead but unhappy with, that this would be your sign to start over. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to talk about timing, because sometimes it's not that you need to start over. So I do want to address that. So I'll talk about when it's not time to start over. And then I'm going to talk about signs that it probably is time to start over. And then the last thing I'll talk about is how to do that gracefully and make the most of it. So first, I want to start with when it's not time to start over. So sometimes it's not time to start over. It's really just time to recommit. So this is something that I think about when I think about workout programs. So when I started doing Beachbody, now it's Body workouts, about 5.5 years ago, and they're 3-week long workouts or 9 weeks long or 100 days or however long workouts, 30 days, 21 days, whatever it is. And so that something that I noticed a lot of the time whenever I would miss a day, or I would just get off schedule, or I'd go on vacation or something, the impulse in me was like, okay, I'm no longer doing the Thursday workout on Thursday. Now I'm doing it on, the following Monday or something like that. And I had this strong impulse like, okay, well, I already messed up, so I need to start over. And I think that sometimes that's not the answer. Sometimes it is, but sometimes that's not the answer. So sometimes it's like, you really just need to recommit, and it's okay. something that people have a lot of issues with, myself included, when it comes to nutrition or fitness programs. I think it's kind of that all or nothing mindset. Like if I can't do this all perfectly on the first try, then I can't do it at all, or I need to completely start over. I don't think that's the case. So maybe in that case, you just recommit and you start the next Thursday, or you just decide, okay, I'm going to shift my days or whatever that is. So I think about that a lot with like workout programs. But in other things too, like sometimes feeling uninspired in your job, maybe you need to start over. That could be. But what if you tried, another role? Or what if you tried your job in another facet? Like say that you are a teacher and you really liked teaching when you first started, but now you're burnt out. And girl, I don't blame you because teachers have it hard. But what if you are just outgrowing the school that you're in or the grade that you're in or something like that? Could you try something different first before completely quitting and starting over? Could you try applying to another school? Maybe it's another school. Maybe it's private versus public school. Maybe it's a city school versus a rural school. Maybe it's a school where the classroom is 35 students instead of 25 students. Sorry, I meant that the opposite way. But like if you have 35 students in your classroom, girl, no wonder you're burnt out. Like maybe check out other districts where they have more like 20 to 25 students in a classroom. And that's not always possible, but I have a friend who's a teacher and she really felt very burnt out on teaching for a while. And then it turned out it was kind of just the circumstance that she was in. And so sometimes, yes, we need to start over, but sometimes we just need to recommit in a different way. So sometimes it's about finding a different role or a different setting or something like that. What if it's not teaching first grade, but it's teaching fifth grade? What if it's something like that? And you can apply that to any job. I know right now I've been kind of open about being burnt out in my job. And so I've been looking into other roles, looking into other things, just to see, is it the job? Is it the company? Is it what I'm doing? Or is it just the circumstance that I'm in? So that's something that you can consider if this applies to, if you're feeling burnt out in your job or something like that. Another good example of when I feel like it's not necessarily time to start over is like in a relationship. So this could be a romantic relationship or it could just be a friendship. But if you're feeling disconnected, sometimes it is time to start over. Sometimes it's time to cut ties with a person, but say that you're married. My husband and I just celebrated 9 years married. So we've been around each other for a long time. We were together 5 years before getting married. So we've been together a long time. And sometimes, I just told you about our walk, but sometimes you get disconnected and that doesn't always feel good. And sometimes it can send you into fight or flight mode where you think, oh, I need to like go running for the hills. The way to solve this is to end it or, start over. And I think that could be the case. I don't know your situation. Obviously, if there's abuse or something like that going on, then yes, I would encourage you to leave the person. But in a relationship, sometimes it's just that you need to communicate better. Sometimes it's that you don't need to start over, but you just need to take a minute and express your needs or express your desires, express your feelings, or set up we talk a lot on the podcast about having check-in meetings with your partner. Maybe you need to set up some check-in meetings. Or if this is a friendship that you're thinking of where you're like, we're just out of sync, we're disconnected, I don't feel lit up by this person anymore. Is that something that you could share with them? Don't drag them down, but is that something that you could be like, hey, can we have a conversation? I think I've been kind of sensitive about this lately, but I feel like lately we haven't been on the same page, or we've had some moments where I've felt like kind of judged by you, or whatever the thing is, is that something that you could have a conversation about before deciding to just be like, well, no longer friends, that person is out of my life, I'm starting over with new friends? or just starting over alone. Relationships are so important. So I feel like there are times in relationships where it's not that you need a new partner or you need a new friend or you need to completely start over. It's just that you need to connect better. And sometimes that first step is really hard and really scary, especially if you've never done that, or you anticipate that this person doesn't really realize that that's going through your brain. But it's better to face now than to be 10 years down the road and then you are starting over. You know what I mean? So I hope that makes sense. But I feel like it's important to acknowledge that even though I am going to talk about signs that it's time to start over, there are times when it's not time to start over. It's just time to like recommit to the process or address the issue or get creative and figure out if there's another thing that you could do that would help you to feel filled up and uplifted by this situation again. So ask yourself, is this truly something that's misaligned for me? Or am I just feeling tired? Am I feeling stuck? Am I feeling kind of scared? Those are some things that you can ask. And then also ask yourself, if this changed tomorrow, would I actually want to start from scratch? Like, would it actually be exciting to me to start new? Or am I just wanting something that's easier because this is hard right now? So in your job, like, would you act when you think about starting over to like, if everything changed tomorrow, you have a completely new job, does that actually excite you? Or did you just want something easier? Because the thing is, if you start a new job, it's not going to be easy from the get-go, right? You're envisioning quitting your job and then getting a job that you just love, but that's not always the case, especially at the beginning. So are you wanting something easier or are you actually feeling like you would want to start from scratch? Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, so that's when it's not necessarily time to start over. Some food for thought when it's not time to start over. Now, I do want to talk about signs that it is time to start over because ultimately that's what we're talking about today. So there are times when, I feel like when we trust our gut and our bodies, we can just do so much, but sometimes our intuition is telling us it's time to start over. And it's kind of like, sometimes it's as obvious as yourself, your brain and your body just screaming at you like, we don't want to do this anymore. We're over it. We need something new, whatever. But sometimes I'm not the most intuitive when it comes to things like that personally. So if you're like me, these are some signs. So there might be a situation where you are like shrinking yourself to fit whatever it is that you are stuck in or that you need to start over. So if it's, let's say, like a hobby or something, like we love our book club, right? We love book club so much, but are you diminishing yourself a bit as time goes on to like fit into the book club? That might mean that it's not for you, right? Hopefully you don't feel like that if you're in our book club because we like to be welcoming to all, but sometimes that's the case. Or if it's that relationship that I'm talking about, are you diminishing yourself or letting parts of yourself that you really love be dimmed, I guess, for the other person? That is probably a strong indicator that you need to start over. That's not something that I guess can necessarily be solved with just a conversation. If someone is constantly making you feel small, that might be a sign that it's time to start over. Another thing that might be a sign is, say that you tried what I talked about before, like you tried a different setting, you tried a different role, you tried a conversation, you tried to fix it and it just didn't work and it still feels off and you still feel down and you still feel drained. Okay, maybe it is time for the new job, or maybe it is time for a new relationship, or maybe it is time to step away from a friendship for a while and kind of start fresh. This is kind of tough to think about, but when you imagine losing this thing, so losing your job or losing your friend or losing your partner or losing book club or whatever it is, when you imagine losing this thing, does it bring you relief or does it bring you fear? if it's bringing you more relief than fear, that's a strong, strong indicator that it's time to start over. So I do want to say that again, because you might not, if you're in your car or walking your dog or getting ready or whatever, you might not have heard that. But when you imagine this loss, losing whatever it is that you're thinking about starting over, does it bring you more relief than it brings you fear? That's a good indicator that you should start over in this thing, right? So that's kind of hard, because sometimes when we think about losing our job, that's really scary because of the income aspect of it. But just pretend that the income's there still, or you can rely on your partner or something, or move in with your parents or whatever. But like, think about, if you're really thinking about your job in this instance, does it bring me more relief than fear to lose my job? That's a really good indicator. Or same with a partner. I mean, I hate to say it, because I hope that everybody stays together forever. It is lovey-dovey and romantic forever. But is it a situation where you feel like you would be more relieved than you would be scared on your own after leaving your partner? I don't know. That's really tough, man. But that is a really, really good indicator. Another sign that it might be time to start over is that your life has changed and the structure of your life has changed. And the life that you want can't really exist in the structure that you've built around this thing that you're ready to start over, right? So a good example of this would be, we were talking about workout routines and things like that. Maybe you used to go to workout classes every day after work or something like that. Well, and now you have a kid, right? So it's really, really tough. You have to pick them up from daycare. You can't really go to workout classes every single day. But it still is something that's good for you. So you're struggling with this. Maybe it's time that you start fresh. Maybe it's time that you start over with something different. Maybe it's time that you let go of those hot yoga classes or whatever it was, and you start to look into more walks, like you can walk your kid in the stroller, or you start to look more into at-home workouts. And you need to start fresh and start with something new and release the thing that you were doing before, because it's not benefiting you to be feeling, I guess there could be a lot of shame with that or something like that, where you're like, oh, I'm never working out. You're not feeling good about yourself. That's a time when maybe it's time to start over. Or if you had a work structure before, right? And you had this structure when you were single of working in the evenings until you went to sleep, or just a totally different structure of your life. And then now you have a partner and you have to consider their time and their feelings, and you have to give them quality time. And, you might not be able to work the same hours or something like that. Maybe that's a moment when you have to realize, okay, like this job, the job is not it's not just burning me out. I'm not just burnt out in my job. It's also impacting what I want my life to look like. And I cannot live the life that I want to live still in this job, right? That could be a change of life structure that might have happened. The last sign, I would say, of it being time to start over and move on is you're holding on to whatever it is that you're not starting over or not giving up. You're holding on out of bad feelings, right? Like you're holding on out of guilt, obligation, fear, something bad. Like you're not holding on because you love it, or because you're curious about it, or because you feel a sense of purpose in it. You're holding on because of obligation and guilt and fear. And that's a really good sign that this is something that we need to 180, right? Like as fast as possible, like if you're maintaining a friendship that you're only doing because you feel really bad if you're not constantly checking in on them, but they're not really like giving much back to you, and they're not making you feel purposeful or loved, or even, throughout your daily life, like you feel obligated to reach out to them, but you don't actually, I hate to say it, but care about what is going on, because you guys are just disconnected, that might be a sign that it's time to move on. Or again, in your job, it's a great example when you're continuing out of obligation or fear of what would happen if you left or guilt. That's something that in my past job, Bailey was really good about encouraging me on this, but my sister Bailey, but we talked a lot when I was in my last job and I was really burnt out. I felt a lot of guilt surrounding the fact that I was really close with my coworkers and I didn't want them to, I guess I just didn't want them to be left high and dry without me. But you can't stay in a job for your coworkers because at the end of the day, this is your life and this is your time and this is your energy and you only have a certain amount of that. And if you're burnt out in your job and it's time to start over, then you have to do that for yourself. You can't consider your coworkers in that. And then the other thing that kept me in that was a sense of fear. So I remember talking to her and being like, but at this point, like I have all this PTO and I have all this, kind of benefits that I was thinking about. And I was like, it would suck to start over with that because the job that I'm in now, it started with like an accrual system. So instead of getting 14 days of PTO at the beginning of the year or whatever, you get like 4 hours of PTO every paycheck, every other week. So when I first started the job, I had like no days off, right? So if I wanted to take a trip, it would have to be a few months into the job before I accrued enough PTO in order to take like a week-long trip or something like that. And I was telling her that that was something that was scary to me. I was like, oh, I hate to let this go. And it was really sweet. She was like, well, Morgan, you don't even feel like you can take time off right now because you feel like they need you and it's really hard. It's too hard to take time off because you feel too like necessary in the everyday and it would just be really hard to take time off anyway. And I was like, okay, yeah, you got a point. So anyway, all that to say, at that time, it was definitely time for me to start over. And I was really happy that I did whenever I left. It made me, I was so much happier once I left, but it would have been easy to stay stagnant in that place out of fear or out of obligation or guilt to my coworkers and my PTO. So, and this could apply to a hobby too, like maybe you're doing a business. This applied to when I was doing Beachbody. I was a body coach and I really liked it for a period of time. But then I noticed that I was doing it more out of obligation and a need to impress than I was out of just it lighting me up. And for a while it was lighting me up, like helping people get accustomed to the products and the workouts that I was doing. I mean, I still would definitely recommend the workouts and the products. I still do them myself, but at some point it felt obligatory and it felt like I was doing it to impress and not because it was lighting me up anymore. And so if you have like, a side hustle or a hobby or a project or something that you're working on that just isn't lighting you up anymore, sure, ask yourself the questions that I asked before. Like if you lost it, would you feel more relieved or would you feel more upset? If tomorrow that thing was gone, would you feel more relief than you would feel fear? But then also maybe that is a time where you just have to start over and you just have to say, you know what? I've put a lot of time and energy into this and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not filling me up like it used to. And I only have so many days left on this earth and I don't want to spend them doing something that doesn't light me up. And I'm not saying you can't like work hard, you maybe just need to work a little bit harder. Sometimes it is a matter of you just need to put a little bit more into it. But if you really put yourself into it and you've done the things and you've stuck it out and you've reflected on it, maybe it is just time to ditch it or start over, So those are some of the signs I feel like that it is time to start over. I think that when you do start over, something you can do to make it a little bit more graceful is take a second between the last thing and the new thing, really take some time to reflect and evaluate and just take a pause and think about, okay, what did you learn from this thing? Because you don't want to resent the thing. Like, I have a lot of love for the job that I had before this job, and I don't feel bitter about it by any means, but it did teach me a lot, and it was still time for me to start over. So think about what you learned from it. Think about what alignment means for you and really consider that when you go into your next thing. And then honestly, take some small steps. Like, if you decide it is start over or time to start over, maybe you can just take some steps to figure out what it is that you love, what it is that lights you up and gets you excited and feels aligned to you. You don't have to like burn everything down to start over. You can start slow and take a few steps, and if you step this direction and that doesn't feel right, take a few steps back, So these are all things that you can do. And then the last thing I would say is if you do feel this pull, you're like, I need to start over, talk to people about it. Surround yourself with people that will uplift you in this decision, people that will help support you, because it's really hard to do this alone. And especially if you're breaking off a relationship, or you're starting a new job, or you're quitting a hobby or a project, or totally 180ing or 360ing, we still don't know which one, your life, then it's so much better to have someone with you supporting you through that, and maybe giving you some guidance if they've ever been through it, or some just support. So hopefully this episode was helpful for you. I feel like it's important to say that starting over isn't just like giving up. It's about giving yourself the space and the grace to grow and change and evolve. And that's okay. And sometimes it's okay to start over. So if you like this episode, please, please, please leave a 5-star rating and a review. We love to see the reviews on Apple Podcasts, the ratings on Spotify, and then drop us a comment if you're watching on YouTube. I don't have my co-host here with me today, Bailey or Eddard, but if you're watching on YouTube and you enjoyed this episode, please let me know. We love to hear your feedback. And next week, we will have Bailey on to chat a little bit. So we're going to be talking a little bit about what's coming next in the podcast. So we would love to have you listen in next week. You don't want to miss this episode. Please tune in and have a great rest of your day. Cheers!